In 7 days, Iran's ballistic missile attacks dropped 90%. They didn't run out of missiles. They had thousands. What they lost was something far more devastating, the ability to think. Look at this satellite footage, launch site after launch site, going dark. Not destroyed, abandoned. Iranian commanders weren't surrendering. They were paralyzed, trapped in a decision-making nightmare they couldn't escape. The United States didn't win this conflict with superior firepower. They won it with superior speed. Every time Iranian leadership gathered intelligence, analyzed their options, and issued orders, American forces had already moved 3 steps ahead. The Iranians were responding to a battlefield that no longer existed. This is the OODA Loop doctrine. Observe, orient, decide, act. Weaponized at a scale never seen before, and it exposed a terrifying truth about modern warfare. Your missiles don't matter. Your tanks don't matter. Your troop numbers don't matter. If your enemy can think faster than you can react, you've already lost. So how do you collapse a military that still has thousands of missiles pointed at your allies? You don't destroy their weapons, you destroy their minds. Iran had spent 40 years building a fortress of fire. Over 3,000 ballistic missiles scattered across hardened bunkers, mountain tunnels, and mobile launchers designed to survive any first strike. Their doctrine was simple. Attack us, and we'll drown your bases in missiles. We'll close the Strait of Hormuz. We'll turn the Persian Gulf into a graveyard for tankers. And for decades it worked. American war planners ran the simulations and walked away. The cost was too high, the casualties too severe. Iran's Revolutionary Guard had embedded itself into Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, a web of proxy forces that could open multiple fronts simultaneously. Every Pentagon assessment assumed the same thing. A war with Iran would be long, bloody, and measured in years, not weeks. But something had changed. New intelligence was painting a different picture. The missiles were real, the bunkers were deep, the proxies were armed. But the system connecting them, the command networks, the communication relays, the decision-making architecture had a weakness, one the Iranians didn't know they had, and one the Pentagon was about to exploit. Iran had surface-to-air missiles. They had ballistic weapons capable of striking bases across the Gulf. On paper, they could inflict serious damage, so why didn't they? The answer isn't about firepower, it's about something far more fundamental, the speed of thought itself. In the 1970s, a maverick Air Force colonel named John Boyd became obsessed with a simple question. Why do some fighters win and others lose, even when the technology is equal? His answer changed modern warfare forever. Boyd called it the OODA Loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. 4 steps that every commander, every soldier, every military system must cycle through before taking action. Here's the key. Victory doesn't go to whoever has the bigger guns, it goes to whoever completes this loop faster. And if you can disrupt your enemy's loop, blind their observation, scramble their orientation, paralyze their decisions, they don't just slow down, they freeze. This is exactly what happened to Iran. Their weapons worked fine, their radar systems functioned, but the invisible architecture of their decision-making had been shattered before the first missile ever launched. The year is 1991. Saddam Hussein commands the 4th largest military on Earth. 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks dug into defensive positions across Kuwait. Western analysts predict 50,000 American casualties. The ground war lasts 100 hours. Not because Iraqi soldiers wouldn't fight, because Iraqi generals couldn't command. In the 5 weeks before a single American boot touched sand, coalition aircraft systematically dismantled Iraq's nervous system. Communication towers, radar installations, command bunkers, fiber optic cables. Generals in Baghdad issued orders that never arrived. Field commanders requested reinforcements from units that had already been destroyed. Entire divisions surrendered, not because they were defeated, but because they were deaf, blind, and alone. This is the OODA Loop in action. Observe, orient, decide, act. Every military cycles through this process. The side that cycles faster doesn't just win battles, they make the enemy's decisions obsolete before they're even executed. Desert Storm proved a devastating truth. Modern warfare isn't won by the army with more tanks, it's won by the army that moves faster through the decision cycle, and America had just shown the world exactly how fast it could move. What the Pentagon learned in Desert Storm it spent 3 decades perfecting. Every war since 1991 became a laboratory. Stealth aircraft evolved from experimental to invisible. Precision munitions went from hitting buildings to hitting specific rooms inside buildings. Satellites multiplied until every square meter of Earth could be watched continuously. But the real revolution happened in the spaces between. Cyber weapons could now blind radar systems before the first jet ever crossed a border. AI algorithms processed targeting data faster than any general could read a briefing. Decision authority pushed downward, letting commanders strike without waiting for Washington. The OODA Loop, observe, orient, decide, act, had been compressed from days into minutes, sometimes seconds. This wasn't evolution. This was engineering a new kind of warfare, one designed around a simple principle: the enemy never gets to finish thinking. Iranian commanders trained for a different war. They studied American tactics, built bunkers, dispersed their forces, prepared for a long fight of attrition and resistance. They had no idea they were about to face a machine specifically built to outpace human decision-making itself. For 40 years, Iran's generals studied one lesson from American wars. The United States bleeds patience. Vietnam, Somalia, Iraq. Every conflict told the same story: absorb the initial blow, drag out the fighting, let body bags erode political will back home. So they built their entire military around this single assumption. Proxy networks scattered across 4 countries, missile sites buried deep in mountain ranges, a command structure designed to survive first strikes and coordinate retaliation over weeks, even months. They didn't need to win battles, they just needed to outlast American attention spans, and for 4 decades this logic held. It deterred direct confrontation through the promise of endless, costly engagement. But Iranian strategists made one catastrophic oversight. They wargamed against the America of 2003, the America that telegraphed invasions months in advance, the America that valued coalition approval over speed. They never modelled what would happen if decisions that once took 72 hours suddenly took 12 minutes, if their bunkers were mapped before the concrete dried, if their entire command structure received orders slower than American missiles received coordinates. That gap between assumption and reality would prove fatal. The first bombs didn't fall on missile silos or tank battalions, they fell on antennas. At 0300 hours local time, Tomahawk cruise missiles began striking radar installations across western Iran. Simultaneously, B-2 bombers released precision munitions on communication relays hidden in the Zagros Mountains. Command bunkers outside Tehran took direct hits from bunker-busting GBU-57s. Within 6 hours, regional commanders were dialing deadlines. Battalion leaders in Khuzestan couldn't reach their counterparts in Kurdistan. Division headquarters sent orders that vanished into silence. Satellite imagery captured the physical destruction: collapsed towers, burning facilities, cratered compounds. But the real damage was invisible. The Americans weren't just destroying buildings, they were severing synapses. A modern military functions like a nervous system. Information flows up, commands flow down, units coordinate laterally. Cut those connections, and you don't have an army anymore. You have isolated fragments, each making decisions with incomplete information, none able to see the full picture. Iran's OODA Loop, observe, orient, decide, act, was already fragmenting. Their commanders could still think. They just couldn't see, and they couldn't speak. Day one wasn't about killing soldiers, it was about creating blindness. While missiles streaked across Iranian airspace, a deeper collapse was already underway. The February 28th strikes didn't just destroy launchers, they killed the men who decided where to aim them: Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, Defense Minister Aziz Nasirzadeh, Army Chief Abdul Rahim Mousavi, IRGC Ground Forces Commander Mohammad Pakpour, all dead within hours of each other in coordinated strikes that hit their exact locations. This wasn't luck. This was the deliberate elimination of every human being who sat at the center of Iran's decision-making architecture. Think about what that means through the OODA Loop. Khamenei was Iran's orient and decide phases personified. For 36 years, every major military decision flowed through his office. He didn't just command the military, he was the lens through which the entire system interpreted reality and chose its responses. Remove that lens, and subordinate commanders face an impossible situation. They have weapons, they have training, But they lack the authority and strategic context to adapt when the battlefield changes. They can execute pre-authorized plans, but they cannot create new ones. This is why Iran's launches became, in the words of analysts, unevenly spaced, significantly smaller in scale, and less coordinated. It wasn't that individual units stopped functioning. It was that the system connecting them, the human architecture of command, had been surgically removed. Iran's greatest perceived strength, its centralized authority under one supreme leader, had become its single point of failure, and the Pentagon had spent years identifying exactly where to cut. The silence was deafening. Across 3 countries, Iranian commanders stared at encrypted radios that produced nothing but static. The leadership they'd sworn to obey had simply vanished from the electromagnetic spectrum, and now each man faced a choice that could end his life. Some chose action. Regional missile commanders, trained for exactly this scenario, initiated independent launch sequences. They believed redundancy would save them. They were wrong. American satellites detected the thermal signatures within seconds. The activation protocols that were supposed to ensure survivability became death sentences instead. Precision strikes arrived before a single missile left its tube. Others chose patience. They powered down, went dark, waited for orders from Tehran that would never come. The distributed network Iran had spent decades building, the one designed to survive any decapitation strike, was now its greatest weakness. Without coordination, units couldn't concentrate firepower. Without communication, air defenses couldn't hand off targets. Without leadership, nobody knew friend from foe. By day 4, American intelligence analysts watched something unprecedented unfold on their screens. An entire military frozen in place, dying not from bullets but from uncertainty. By day 7, Iranian missile launches had dropped 90%. Not because the missiles were gone, they weren't. Dozens still sat in hardened silos across the country, fueled and ready. They couldn't fire them. Here's what most people don't understand about modern warfare. Launching a ballistic missile isn't pressing a button. It's a chain. Command authority must verify the order. Intelligence must confirm the target. Sensors must provide coordinates. Communications must relay authorization codes between multiple nodes. Break one link, the chain slows. Break 3 links simultaneously, the chain doesn't exist anymore. American planners had spent years mapping these dependencies. They knew which radar fed which command post, which fiber optic cable connected which bunker, which satellite uplink authorized which launcher. So they didn't chase missiles, they chased decisions. By the 7th day, Iranian commanders faced an impossible situation. They had weapons but no confirmed targets, orders but no way to verify them, authority but no way to exercise it. This is the difference between attrition and paralysis. Attrition destroys capability. Paralysis destroys coherence. Iran's military didn't run out of missiles, it ran out of certainty. Here's the truth that military academies will study for generations. This wasn't a victory of superior firepower. It was a victory of superior thinking. John Boyd's insight cuts through the fog of war with surgical precision. The OODA Loop, observe, orient, decide, act, determines who wins, not who has more tanks, not who has more soldiers, who can think faster. By day 4, American commanders were cycling through complete decision loops in minutes. They observed Iranian movements through persistent drone coverage. They oriented instantly using AI-fused intelligence. They decided with pre-delegated authority. They acted before Iranian commanders finished their morning briefings. Iranian forces, their loops stretched to days. Reports crawled up shattered chains of command. Decisions waited for commanders who were already dead or disconnected. Actions came too late to matter. This same principle collapsed Iraq in 100 hours during Desert Storm. It collapsed Iran in 168. The technology evolved, milder missiles, better sensors, faster networks, but Boyd's fundamental truth remained unchanged. Speed of decision beats massive force. Every single time, Iran built its military for a war that no longer exists. That mismatch wasn't a disadvantage, it was a death sentence. The Pentagon calls it decision dominance, the ability to observe, orient, decide and act faster than your enemy can respond. Iran just became the textbook case study. Every defense minister from Beijing to Moscow watched this unfold in real time. They saw a regional power with thousands of missiles, hundreds of thousands of troops, and decades of preparation paralyzed in under a week. Not because they lacked courage, not because they lacked equipment, but because they couldn't think fast enough. Iran built their entire military around a single assumption that any conflict would unfold slowly enough for their layered defenses to matter. They were wrong, and that miscalculation cost them everything. Here's what keeps generals awake at night now. This wasn't some experimental capability. This is baseline American warfare. The drones, the cyber weapons, the satellite networks, the precision munitions, this is the standard package. The real lesson isn't about technology, it's about adaptation. Iran had 20 years of warnings. They watched Iraq, they watched Libya, they watched Syria, and they still built a military designed to fight the last war. In modern conflict, speed isn't an advantage. Speed is survival. You now have the tools to read any military confrontation before the first shot is fired. When the next crisis erupts, Taiwan, the Baltics, the South China Sea, ask yourself 3 questions. First, who controls the information environment? The side that sees everything while remaining invisible has already won half the battle. Satellites, drones, cyber dominance, these determine who fights blind. Second, how fast can each side cycle from observation to action? Hours, minutes, seconds? The gap between those speeds is the gap between victory and destruction. Iran measured their responses in days. America measured theirs in moments. Third, where are the communication dependencies? Every military has a nervous system. Find the nodes and you find the vulnerability. Sever them, and you turn a coordinated force into scattered chaos. The OODA Loop transforms complexity into clarity. Observe, orient, decide, act. Whoever completes this cycle faster wins, not the largest army, not the most weapons, the fastest thinker. This is how you read military power in the 21st century. Raw numbers are history, speed is everything. The launch sites are dark now. You've seen this image before, but now you understand what it actually means. This wasn't about American firepower. Iran had firepower. This was about American sword and speed. The ability to find, decide, and strike before the enemy could complete a single thought. 34 years ago, Saddam Hussein watched his million-man army dissolve in 100 hours. He never understood why. His generals had the same tanks, the same training, the same will to fight, but they were operating in yesterday while American commanders lived in tomorrow. Iran studied that war. They built bunkers. They dispersed their forces. They prepared for everything, except the one thing that mattered, the tempo, because the weapons always change. Stealth fighters replace bombers, drones replace pilots, satellites replace scouts, but the principle underneath remains exactly the same. The side that cycles faster wins, and right now no nation on Earth cycles faster than the United States. You now understand what 99% of observers miss, the invisible architecture that decides wars before the first shot is fired. Speed isn't everything. Speed is the only thing.